morning. Once again, it is my privilege and pleasure to come and spend these few moments of your time. Time shifts, and along with it, it is a subtle shift in focus. The two worlds are separating, and it is becoming more and more clear which side of the divide one stands upon. And in doing so, you find that some friends, as they have used to have been, are stepping more on one side, and you are losing ground, as it were, losing touch with the focus of attention. So you can see that there are, shall we call them, conspiracies on both sides of the divide. One viewpoint versus the other viewpoint. And each one, shall we say, will meet the consequences of such viewpoints. That is enough to begin a conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us again today. Following on from your opening statement, if you can provide some clarity to us around what we could do if we find ourselves in a position where we feel like we are on a different side of the divide that our friends are on. What advice do you have to give to somebody that's conscious of that?
First of all, it is important to re-evaluate where you stand, because there are markers on each side of the divide. Shall we say, progressively, you will notice an increase in the young version, and on the opposite polarity, one starts to see an older quality, an older personalities. And as it is clear in the physical world, the older one is, the closer one is to moving beyond, and the younger one is, the more learning is to happen. Do you follow? So you have to decide, are you going to develop? Are you going to progress? Or are you going to stabilize, to try to hold on to a past that is fast losing, with which you are fast losing your grip? Do you follow what I mean? And so one has to re-evaluate, decide which of the consequences you wish to engage with. And as such, wish your fellow human beings the best well-being, that they gain what they have come to learn. Either side of the divide, but shall we say, always to hold to your own principles, your own determination. Try, I should say, to accept that there is what you would call a conspiracy only because one joins forces with, shall we say, one side or the other. However, there is always the possibility to stand outside of both.
Okay.
Shall we say, if one can stand outside of both, then you are not being, shall we say, influenced by the propaganda. And yet, even then, one has, shall we say, to energize one side or the other.
Mm-hmm. That might be a good opportunity for us to lead into one of our questions I've got today. I'd like to have a conversation about politics. If we could start off by talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. Can you give us a higher perspective on what's happening here?
First of all, shall we say, for years, the community that has called itself spiritual has tried to, shall we say, separate and avoid the topic of politics. But politics is everything. So, shall we say, it is a time of revealing the truth that has been hidden. I've said, shall we say, before, this is the time for transparency, accountability, shall we say, and it is time to put into action the truth that all beings are born equal, not with equal, shall we say, talents, but each in their own way are born of their own talent. And as such, each is to be respected. One expects to be respected, then first of all, one should respect others. And so what you see occurring is the lack of respect for one another. One attempts, shall we say, to write history by attacking those who are, shall we say, the result of history, not the historians themselves.
Yeah.
And from the other side, trying to hold on to an old mechanism that is already collapsing around their ears. So it comes to that point. Must you have a war? Must you have conflict? Because nobody ever wins in war. All are lost. And years and years pass before you find your center again. You follow what I mean? The spirit requires a center. The heart of matters, the quality. One needs to be in that place where harmony can offer balance, because if one is out of harmony with one's environment, one is out of harmony with oneself. You follow what I mean? So humanity as a whole is out of harmony with their living condition. And how to bring that back into harmony if you are fighting one another. Respect for your fellow humans, respect for your fellow sentient beings, and respect for the sentient being that is the planetary guardian. As we have said before, the guardian itself cannot be overcome by such minor beings. Do you follow? The spirit, the spiritual nature of creation does not allow for that. So if you want, shall we say, to progress, if you want to succeed, if you want to grow, then align yourself with the activity of the planetary guardian. That, shall we say, then one's political alignment needs to be for the well-being of its inhabitants. The politics is not politics of selfishness, but politics that benefits all, with true respect for the environment around oneself. And that is different for different cultures and different areas, shall we say, different continents.
Mm-hmm. So can you talk to me about President Trump and his role in the shift in consciousness, or what's happening at the moment for humanity? Many of us are quite baffled as to why he was elected in the first place. So if you can give us some clarity as...
you understand, in the moment of fear, one tries to bring, shall we say, stability, which holds to one's desires, one's need for security and safety. And so one chooses, shall we say, the strong arm of the law. But strong arms are more often, shall we say, taken up by the lawless, not by the law. So this man is not who you think he is. This man represents the old universe. I already said that the old universe would attempt to hold on by whatever means possible. And so that is the case. And so you have brought yourself in that regard, shall we say, closer to uprising. The uprising that eventually and almost always ends in conflict. The world as such is not divided into countries. You wanted globalization and now you have it. But your globalization is attempting to hold on to power, as always. So what is the alternative? Because both sides want control, both sides want to separate rather than look at the whole. And yet spiritual uplifting is suggesting that it is now the time of wholeness. The planet has to wake up, and everyone has to play a role in keeping it in balance. So you cannot, shall we say, attack one part of the world and starve another part of the world and attempt to hold on to power and greed and so forth for your own benefit, because the whole is shattering. Do you understand? And so this leader as such is leading the charge into, shall we say, a choice. The world has a choice. And eventually, whether it is this time or after the destruction, do you understand? After the wars that will follow, if it is not heeded, then eventually the change will occur. There is no stopping the evolutionary shift. But it requires those that want to move towards the progressive to come out, to take a stand and to stop avoiding. So I would say, if you want to avoid this, you have to take your part that is in your system to vote with where you wish to go. you have to decide which side of the divide you want to be on, because, as I say, those that decide one way will experience a very different world to those that choose to avoid it. They will, shall we say, stay in the old pattern and be, shall we say, picked upon by it until destruction occurs.
So is this upcoming general election for the United States, which is in November, is this more significant than previous ones, or in terms of the global awakening and the shift in consciousness?
Of course. Of course, it is the final stand. You understand, this has been where the country has been for hundreds of years, wanting to avoid being universal, wanting to hold on to its powers and what it sees as its assets, rather than spreading it around the planet as a whole, where everyone will benefit, even themselves. But if you cannot see that because of the blindness of, shall we say, greed and desire, then the consequences shall we say, that there is more conflict because the whole nature of the planet will cause it. You cannot separate, shall we say, all aspects of life as you understand it, because it is all arrives at through leadership and vision.
Okay.
So shall we say, your law of attraction, your law of magnetism requires a vision. Let us not say visualization, because that brings it into a specific tone, but a vision is where things align towards a greater harmony and bringing together for a beneficial outcome for all. Leadership, I want to say, in this case, brings a vision to all people of the world. Otherwise, the conflicts across the planet will continue, and they are everywhere. Why are they everywhere? It's because the leadership planet, the leadership of the planet's guide lost direction, refused to take that role and return to its militarism. Now that is over.
Okay. So I would like to briefly talk about New Zealand and how we're coming up to our election. But beforehand, can we talk about Jacinda Ardern, who's a very different leader and is getting a lot of worldwide attention for her leadership style and her decisions, particularly through the COVID-19 lockdown. Can you tell me if she has a significant role for New Zealand in the world stage?
I want to say a significant role because she stands for the youth. Not just for herself, but for her leadership. She has, shall we say, been tapped on the shoulder. This one has an understanding, but does not really recognize who gave that tap. If you like, that spirit as a whole, that is the unifying spirit of humanity as such, tapped this one on the shoulder and gave shall we say, significant framework. You understand, difficult situations to build up around, so that the demonstration of humility and encapsulating an attempt to bring everyone together. These are the leadership demonstrations of a possibility in the world. And it is the significant case that while there are still older guiding forces, the new force is youth. And that is not, shall we say, it holds with it a sense of responsibility. The three: transparency, accountability, and responsibility. This is the new way forward, the new order as such. And as such, then, so much has to be revealed. This is the age of revelation. You understand? For the last period of time, the humanity has gone through dark ages, the re-bringing back and the age of reason towards its final stagement, the age of revelation. And so the forces begin to become transparent. Shall we say, one could argue with this, but even your technology shows that nobody can hide anything anymore. So you are to be judged by the truth. And as has been said, truth will set you free. What is hidden keeps you enthralled. What is hidden keeps you in servitude. And so, shall we come back to your original question here? What is breaking out is the vestiges of slavery. You understand? The recognition that everyone has been brought to slavery. Everyone is being controlled, shall we say, by an undercurrent. And that is a definition for slavery. An elite, small group, having everyone answer to them. What can you do? You have the forces, shall we say, you have your police, you have your military. What are they there for? To protect you or to enslave you? And that is a new message for even, shall we say, the police. The police truly have to transform to protect the transparency, to open up and enforce that there is no hidden world going on underneath. There is no gang, as shall we say, no criminality, and no criminality in the very top reaches. That nothing is being hidden away. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it is, shall we say, that the conspiracy that there is something hidden, of course, and the conspiracy that shall we say, a certain group that wishes to press a different view is going to reveal that that is another conspiracy. Do you understand? But the conspiracy really is that you are under slavery. And this leadership has the opportunity to begin to reveal itself, to reveal what is happening in what are called the halls of power.
Which leadership is that, sorry?
The new leadership, shall we say, the young leadership. And even when there is, shall we say, an older guide, it is still the new undercurrent that is pressing for transformation. So the age of revelation begins. And shall we say, it will take 200 years before all is revealed. Then history will be a very different account.
Another 200 years from now.
Of course. That is the time of accountability, when all of the records are set straight. All of what has occurred put to rights.
So
I want to say, not exactly, of course, 200 years, but in that sort of time frame.
Yeah, okay, great. So leading into the New Zealand election then this year, is there any key focus for us to consider, or a higher perspective that we should be thinking of to support the growth and evolution that we've started to experience?
I want to say it matters less because both sides in your community are moving in that direction. Both sides. So in many ways, there is a greater opportunity for, shall we say, a government that contains both and listens to both sides, that listens to the opposition, the opposite, and sees how to work to provide for everyone's perspective as best as you can. You understand? So then you begin to avoid, shall we say, the banter and look towards the coming together, to work as a unit representing all points of view and listening, you understand, to build a harmonious government where everyone feels they have been taken into account. Do you understand that is that the young do not, shall we say, eliminate the old, and the old do not feel resentful of the young, but they all feel listened to, and that is a possibility in the modern world as it is. You understand that might show a greater degree of maturity than has ever been brought about before. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, thank you.
Then once again, thank you for your time and for the work you are about to do for the benefit of humanity and for the benefit of your community, for the ripples that you send from your family out into the community, into the countryside, into the country, into the world. You understand, every little ripple aligns itself with similar ripples.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Then thank you and good morning.